trying to find alternatives through alliance summits and so on, and investing its energies there. I mean, one of the things that's, I mean, when people mention industrial strategy, you know, that's been such a panacea for the left. We're always in doubt. Let's look for an industrial strategy and we get government to agree on industrial. Then we're making progress. Now, who can remember on Mbeki, the growth and development summits? I think there were 3 of them. And every time Kusatu raised a banner of blood being on the streets to fight against gear, they come away from a growth and development summit, and we're making progress because, you know, industrial strategy is on the cards. So this notion is very deep in Kusatu. Now, in the light of Marikana and so on, and latest Department of Labor reports about the growing disaffection of working class people, of people leaving trade unions and so on, that's the price it's had to pay of locating itself within the sphere of the elite. And I think if you're calling on us to do the same thing again with the NDP, I'm sorry, I'm saying, you know, we've been there before, we've done this for years and years and years. And it also presumes that the only way you engage policy is to sit on a committee and present proposals. I would argue that people the poor protesters in Cape Town yesterday are engaging policy. You know, by going into the city and saying, well, to hell, we don't have proper toilets, we'll come and dump shit on your things. That's engaging policy. You know, it's a myth that you only, like some person said, we need intellect, we need people who are clever blacks to go to a committee and put proposals. There are other forms of struggle and engagement that challenge society to have a vision of alternatives. And I think in that sense, yes, I agree with you, to try and make the struggle around whether it's decent work or not decent work, I think is because even the word decent work is a very narrow ILO sort of conception. I mean, in the history of the working class, ideas of humanization of work, of having the quality of work changed, of having work, I mean, there are visions, important visions there, but we're not even vaguely there if we get caught up in the NDPs and these sort of cozy little coteries that meet and announce, etc. And we need to review what has happened to the labor movement over these years of being focused there and ignoring its base, the growing disaffection. That's the most serious crisis of our time. If we're going to affect policies, we're going to have to reconnect with methods of struggle that bring together the base of the working class with all these agencies and institutions that attempt to shape public policy. Then we might be making some sort of progress.
Thanks very much. Devin is insisting on one sentence.
Just one sentence. Just from what Lenny said, it just reminds Karl of what Robert Wade said in relation to the World Bank, that this exercise is all about the art of paradigm maintenance. Would you agree with that?
Well, time's up. but I'm definitely going to be suggesting to the captain of the ship that he should recruit Lenny as a commissioner.
Lenny will refuse.
His masterful understanding of what's happening. Yeah, look, let me start with the kind of the more sort of concrete and specific questions, and then perhaps try and wrap up. So, firstly, why is it not in the public domain that this is not a blueprint? Well, it's been appropriated and defined as a blueprint by government, and that suits a lot of people to present it as a blueprint, something that can't be negotiated. I mean, I think that if you look at the document itself, it's laughable to call it a blueprint. I mean, it cannot be imagined as a blueprint. And so if it is to be taken seriously as a set of ideas and as a set of possibilities, then it has to be engaged with not as a blueprint, but in other ways that I've tried to suggest. Whether that potential emerges depends on the response of people in the public sphere. Entitlements and rights, yes. Doesn't the idea of decent work dilute the idea of rights. I think in some, and I mean this goes in many ways to Mark Haywood's early presentation on the relation between the Constitution, the clash, the conflict in a way between the vision of the Constitution and the National Development Plan. I think what I've tried to emphasize in my own understanding of the current situation is that there's a limit to how rights exist in the Constitution and are asserted in the Constitutional Court. There's a real limit to the extent to which those are realized in practice. And a lot of that has to do with, on the one hand, lack of capacity in the state, but on the other, what you can call malicious compliance, where you comply in form, but not in substance. And so there's a real question to be asked about how far you can go with asserting rights in the kind of society, with the kind of state and the kind of direction that we've got in South Africa. I mean, the textbooks case was a good kind of indicator of both what could be achieved, but also the limitations of that. So there's the question of building state capability long term in order to achieve these rights. And I really believe that rights are not going to be achieved unless you can build that kind of capability, not substantive rights. Oops, thanks. The point about the second, the CWP forming a second labour market and a trap. I think those sorts of things also have to be engaged, they have to be researched, we have to explore what really happens with the CWP. But again, it comes back to the earlier point that I made. How do we address these problems? And I don't think we address them by simply asserting the primacy of the primary labour market and trying to make every other labour market the same as the primary labour market. It's not going to happen. So we have to find ways to meet the needs of people way outside of the primary labour market. On the relation of the plan to the short term, the long term to the short term, much of what happens in South Africa is at odds with the vision of the plan. Now the question is, it seems to me that the point about a long-term planning vision is that you establish certain goals and certain targets for what you want to achieve over the long term, and then you say, well, what do we need to do today and tomorrow in order to move in that direction? And that's what if the plan is to be implemented, if it's to become a reality, that's progressively what has to take place, is that the long-term vision has to be translated into shorter-term plans that take us in that kind of direction. And then finally, I suppose it's the question posed by Gavin and Lenny and Devon, and that is, do we engage with this or not? Well, a large part of that, I really can't comment on that. I'm in the Commission. This is something that has to be debated and discussed within the progressive movement, within Labour and beyond. I've tried to suggest ways in which the plan opens up a space, but a space that is very much already defined by the kinds of struggles that have taken place within the Tripartite Alliance over policy issues over the last 20 years. And in that sense, it's simply a continuation of the same kind of engagement. And I think it's pretty clear that to date, very little has been achieved through that kind of engagement. The question is whether there's any prospect of changing that, or whether to give up on that space altogether. And I think that is the kind of big challenge and the big question that is facing Labour in this Marikana moment. And I think that Marikana has really blown open a set of underlying questions that were not really being addressed within the Labour movement, and placed those on the agenda in a way that they are now at the front of the issues confronting the Labour movement. And I think that those issues are raised on the ground in Marikana. I think they're also raised, in Kasatu House, in Braamfontein as well, and by the kind of current contestations over the future of society. So I really do think that is the big set of questions, and whether there is a different way of engaging that space and making things happen and relating, what Lenny was talking about, relating the streets to the conference table, or whether completely different spaces have to be created for that. And I don't want to hear, hazard my own views on what that space may or may not look like and how to achieve it. So I'm talking here about the National Development Plan and what it does say and what it doesn't say. But I think those are the big questions that face us today in South Africa.
Thanks very much to Karl for, I think, a really brilliant presentation. Thanks to all of you for coming, and especially those who contributed. But before you leave, I wanted to tell you about two events that I think will interest many of you. The first is our next SWOP breakfast, which will be on the 15th of November, when Neil Coleman will be presenting his, again, brilliant critique of the National Development Plan. And the second is an event on the 4th of December in the evening, where Devin has organized a workshop, and on the evening there's a public event. He's bringing out a group of people from Bhutan to talk about their economics of happiness. And if you're interested in the notion of decent life, and especially the question of non-materialist measures of decent life, I think that will be a very interesting event. So thanks, everybody. That was good.